Just thinking about your visits here, how often you came, and memories you have. How often would you have come as a child to Strokestown House?
Almost every summer. I came here for the first time in 1945 when I was 5, and we came over on the boat to Callery. Stayed the night in Westland Row Station, the hotel, where the trains went more or less through the bedrooms. We came down here by train. I think we had a change in Mullingar in those days.
Did you? Change in Mullingar to come to Stroke? To Longford?
Longford, yeah. And then we came for several years until we missed out one when my family lived in Egypt. But we only missed one summer, and then we went on coming until 55, 56. That photograph on there was taken in 56.
Oh.
And after that, my sister and I were grown up and scattered about, you know, doing different things in different places. But then we came from, you know, on and off with our husbands, and later on our own, and children.
So you have memories of this house as a child, wandering through the rooms and...
Oh yes, yeah.
This room in particular?
We slept up on the very top floor initially, till that all got closed down eventually. And they turned the schoolroom into a bedroom, which I think you now call the nursery.
Yes, yes.
But it was wonderful here because we just went everywhere. We went out and got the turf in from the bog, and went out and got all the crops in as well. And
so you helped out. You went out and helped bring the crops in.
Helped. It was the operative word, really. I think they put up with a lot. We both fell backwards off the pay shifter once, and that was not popular. but we survived it. Yeah. And then we used to climb up onto all the hay in the barn. And
remembering Olive,
sorry?
Remembering Olive, your grandmother.
Oh yes.
Well, can you tell us kind of your memories of Olive?
She was great. We had a lot of fun with her. Particularly playing croquet. We nearly always played croquet after tea every day. We had to be very sure to dry the mallets and the balls and put them back in their box properly, and nothing was left out. And we played a lot of tennis. She still played tennis then. And they had a grass court down at the end of the garden, and the hard court in the Haggard. And she was a keen tennis player. And she also used to take us once every year to Ross's Point, where we were made to swim in the sea, whatever the weather. And I can remember having a picnic under a stone wall in our Mackintoshes, getting wetter and colder by the minute.
An Irish summer.
Yes, yes. But it was great. I mean, you know, sometimes the summers were wonderful weather, and we rode the ponies and we bicycled, and it was wonderful.
Horses and ponies were a big part of the house here, I know, for Olive as well.
Oh, they were. They were. I was very bad at riding. I preferred the donkeys because it was less far to fall. I was much given to falling off into cowpats. Remember that well.
And you met Olive as well, so you have memories of Olive.
Yes, I met Olive. Well, we came to Strokestown in 1959, just coming 60 years ago. But before that, I'd been through the place. There was a football pitch down there at the back, which later was transferred out to the Turner Farm, which now is somewhere else. But so I had come in through the place, but I'd never been in it. but I met Olive in earnest nearly 60 years ago. We had a confrontational time for many, many years. We had started up at the top of the town, belonged to the estate, and there was a serious confrontation, an ongoing serious confrontation for many years over such matters. But anyway, we eventually we tried to buy 5 or 6 acres of land at the back of the garage up there now, and I got somebody I thought would be an estate agent from Sligo who was very diplomatic, who would have dealt with such things, and he came down to Olive and the Major, but he came back and said no, they won't sell any of it. And very shortly after that, Olive was objecting to our public address system very much, because when we had moved where we are now, we had a public address system, and of course it could be heard clearly down here, and this was one of the real bugbears in this house. So very shortly after this man went, our girl on the switch, our receptionist, Breach Lane, who's still there actually after nearly 50 years, said to me, you know, Madam is looking for you. And I said, well, what does the old bee want now?
Quite so.
And I came down here, and was it Massey? Met me at the door, the butler, and he brought me in here, and I sat down. Olive was here, and the stove was a bit further out there. And anyway, I sat down, and she asked me would I like a cup of tea or this, and this was a serious change in affairs. And then she said that Nick, her son, had inherited the whole property and he wasn't coming back, and it was all going to be sold, and that she thought we should try to buy the lot. Well, I nearly collapsed on the chair. I said nothing for about 5 minutes. But of course, then it was our intention, we were borrowing the money, to buy it, keep the bit of land, and sell the rest, buy, pay back the debt and say thank you very much. Because I went back then to my fellow directors, there were a few of us, and I said this, and we all realised that if somebody bought it, we couldn't expand. And just 2 years before that, we had been appointed importers for Scania trucks for Sweden for the 26 counties. And indeed, unfortunately or unfortunately, there was such trouble in the north. After a while they came back and said, would we take over the north? And I almost did. But our average age at that stage, I was 42 or 3, but most of the people working in it were in their 20s. And I started to say, Christ, sending young fellas up to the place they were coming in was Larne. And I wisely or unwisely, and this will never be known, refused. So maybe that was a commercial mistake, but some of us could have been killed. So anyway, the times passed. The auction was then, there was 3 auctioneers, London auctioneer, Hamilton and Hamilton's, who were the estate auctioneers in Dublin, and Mrs. McNally in Elphin, who was a local auctioneer. Now you must have still a catalogue, John. Yeah. I forget, it wasn't Knight Rudley, it was, I just can't remember, it was one of the big ones. And then we became friendly, and like we were talking from 2 different angles, and we were both interested in history. So she'd send for me now and then, and I'd come down and we'd have a chat here. And they were wondering in the garage where the hell I was, how I was spending so long here. So we had many long and lengthy conversations, with mainly Olive. Now the Major didn't participate, only little. And I felt since it was a pity, because being through the Russian campaign and having read that history, I thought it was a great pity, like we all do, I suppose, in later life. we didn't ask somebody who was actually there, who went through it, the whole thing of who said not to take the Romanovs out, or who said what, and it was debate at the time that it was Lord George, the Prime Minister in England, and then others said the orders came from the Crown, that his first cousin George V was afraid it would cause strife in England. Anyway, they were all mutilated and shot, and they weren't even shot indeed, some of them were beaten to death, finally, the whole family, including some of the workers. So that was the kind of period that he had been in Russia, and I think was told to get out any way he could.
I was told he had a price on his head from both sides, both the Red Army and the White Army. Yeah. How much truth there is in that, I have no idea. Well, that's about as much as I know about it. I, like you, I'm very sorry I don't know more.
They were sent in as military men into Russia and to train and to assist, and then the whole thing collapsed and the revolution came up, and the Tsar's family, the whole family were arrested. I think in 17, I think they were killed in 18. They actually threw them down a mine shaft or something.
I mean,
terrible. They dug them up, you know. I was in Petersburg last year.
I heard.
Have brought them back to the burial church of the Tsars of Russia, the Romanovs, and their bones are actually in a whole new side chapel there, that whole family. So but anyway, I'm straying again as usual. We're not on the point. But I thought it was a pity because he as you were saying earlier, he had gone through the 2 world wars.
Yes.
He wasn't that old, you see, at the Second World War. He had a lot of military experience, and he must have gone into the First World War at about 17.
Yes, he must have done, I think, because he certainly went the whole way through the Second World War, because he was in Burma most of the time.
Yeah, he was.
He got trapped behind the lines and he looked after by a Burmese family.
Yes. Did he go into...
It was very brave of them.
What was the first country that was taken over? What was was it Poland? Did he go... The Germans took over Poland very early. I have an idea.
I don't know what he did in the beginning, because Burma obviously came later, yes.
You know, they were planning to try to make an atomic bomb. They were at this water in the North Sea, called heavy water. But that they put up a fight. I have a vague idea.
The heavy water thing was in Norway, wasn't it?
It was Norway, I mean. You're spot on.
The only reason I know that was because I've been to that place.
You're dead right. You're dead right, because they fought and they sunk a German warship, actually, before they were taken over. Now, I think he had something to do with that. I think he was posted there. You see, he would have been a very experienced army man.
Yes,
and he,
yes.
39 and 3, 42. He was a very young man then by senior military strategy. But anyway, that's as it may be. But we were really kind of interested in trying to keep records, the same as everything else. So you look back and say, who's that or whatever.
Yes.
And I suppose these, like the very, very interesting interview that Jim Fahey did with your grandmother.
That was a very interesting, yes it was very good.
Very, very interesting. She gave a description, well she gave me in a lot of things the description of going to Buckingham Palace and coming here as you came here, and I had a house in Pont Street in Chelsea.
That's right, yeah.
I don't know where it was.
That was right, that was where my great-grandmother lived. Olive's mother.
Well, they must have had another house in London as well.
She lived in Halsey Street at one stage, but my mother was born in Pont Street.
Yeah. Well, they sold a house in the 50s to the Kirkwoods.
That's right.
Yes, and that must have been another house.
Yeah, they
must have had 2 houses.
My great-grandmother lived in, after they left Pont Street, she lived in Halsey Street.
Yes.
Which was the other side of Sloane Street in London.
Well, I remember being some years ago on Pont Street, there's fashionable restaurants and things in it now. And
Oh, yeah, all sorts of things, yeah, yeah.
it is. Now, the just, I suppose, we're having a chat to try to have a record.
You can have a lot of editing to do, I feel.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how long the tape lasts, but I'm sure these gentlemen here are well able to edit. Anyway, our intention, I better come back to the fact, as I say, was to sell it. Now, some time later, she sent for me again, and she said, I don't want a public auction. There are now, I think there's 3 or 4 interested parties, and in a few days, this is hopefully going to be dealt with in London, and I think Mr. Callery should go over. So with whatever warning we had, which was reasonably limited, myself and 2 company directors, Tom Joe deceased, Peter Cannellan solicitor deceased, later a judge or a district, yes, and John Tracy, who was still well in the land of the living, retired. We went over and we were put in one hotel, I forget, one of the better hotels in London, and there were 3 others or 2 other prospective bidders, and they were put around in the other hotels, and the auctioneers, as they don't like to be called, the London, the Dublin, and Mrs. McNally, together with Colonel Nick Pakenham-Mahon, or Hales Pakenham-Mahon, went round to each hotel and took offers. Now at that stage it was the intention, they had got plans to build a smaller house in the lawns. And I said that to Nick finally, you know, till we had got the bit we wanted, and we're going to dispose of the rest, that they were welcome to stay in the house. So that house in the lawns was never built. And I hadn't been through this house at all. I had been in here, and in good times and bad times. The first time I was here, nearly 60 years ago, I got the mother and father of a telling all,
Quite.
right? Which I was well able to take. I was only then in my early 20s and, well, trying to survive hard and learning what life is about. And anyway, to make a long story short, we were successful. We bought, that was the 15th of May, I think, 1979. So that's next May, 40 years ago. So immediately she sent for me, as soon as I was back the next morning, and I came down and she congratulated me, and she said that she had given papers to the National Library in Dublin, and she had the time she gave them, the early 50s, and she had the people she gave for, and could I go up and collect those papers? And she had given a church chalice, which must have been the church chalice from that church in the lawn, to the Protestant church body, and they'd never given it back. And could I get that? Now at that stage, Geoffrey Lefroy was taking over. Right. And Geoffrey's report was, if this place kept going on the way it was, that the inheritance would be spent. I wasn't in any position as a relatively young man to arrive in and demand all those things. I did check with the Protestant church body later, and there is a chalice there, and there isn't any writing on it. And I'll tell you who John would know about that now. That very nice girl, she did a doctorate on Strokestown. What's her name?
Susan Hood.
Susan Hood. And she is an archivist with the Church of Ireland body in Rathmines. and she's on the choir in St. Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin if you want to get her. And she, nobody, because I did inquire, and she said, yes, it does exist. It is there, but we were unsure of its origin. So maybe you'd want to talk higher up the ladder to it. But anyway, then I had never been through the place. I'd been in this room, mainly, and I'd been in the dining room, and that was about that. So then when maybe a few weeks after that, the Major and Olive were going to London. And I think they said they were staying in the Irish Club in Eaton Square. I don't even know if it's there still.
No, neither do I. I remember them always staying there, but I don't know whether it's still there.
There's some difficulty over the, what do you call that, the Duke of Westminster owns nearly all the property.
Yeah.
There was something about the leases. I was in it many years ago, and it was quite well run and as a proper club. But I then said to him, would you mind if when you're not there, if I take a look at the place? So in looking at the place, there was papers everywhere. And in that room in there was a pile of papers so high on the desk. Maybe they were going through them. And within 20 minutes of being there, I pulled out a very moving famine plea from the townland I was born in. Now, the possibility of that happening would be millions to one. Millions and millions. And I sat down and read that, and I said, if this is here, what other documents are here to unfold? And when Nick's wife, you see, Nick was had been moved, that was around I had with Olive too, near retirement, had been moved in over a regiment in Derry, and hottest place in the north. I said that to Olive. I said, why didn't he just resign? And she said, my son must do his duty. Well, that might be down an Irishman coming into London Derry on that mission. It was well beside his death warrant. But anyway, he certainly would have been a target in Ireland and England. But when then Nick's wife and a cousin from, I think she lived in, was it Jersey or Guernsey or the Isle of Man?
Oh, I know who that was. Elizabeth Burrard.
Yes.
Yeah. She was a cousin of Olive's.
Yes. Now, John, just as a matter of interest before I forget it, the two pictures that were in the two fashionable Victorian frames, each side of the dining room wall, walk in and turn around. Do you remember those two frames?
Two empty frames, is it?
They're empty frames.
Yes.
She took those two pictures out of there.
She took them, she was going to have them copied before selling the pictures at auction, hence the empty frames, but the copies were never made. Is that right?
Must exist. Now, the boroughs and their connections were important people in England. I routing through nearly world history, like I'm talking to you, because I have no kind of system. I don't know how to turn on a computer. I've come across all those names, and when I see them, I try to trace them. So, like that letter I got, that Dennis Mann's niece was married to this. I know who that guy was, and he was a serious administrator.
Olive's mother's maiden name was Burrard.
Yes. So, but anyway, I said to them, they were, you know, Paddy Tyner was out there in the garden burning stuff. So Olive's,
Gracious.
The clothes, which the personal things, a lot of them were burned. So I said to Nick's wife, would you mind leaving the papers of not a personal nature? So she said she would, and that's how that is the story of why we're sitting here in this room.
Yeah.
So that's true facts.
Absolutely. Last time I was here before Granny moved to England and then died, Olive that is, she'd shut off the room in there altogether, her study, because it was full of papers, as you rightly say. But there were an awful lot more of them in here. And every time anybody came in and wanted to find somewhere to sit down, she'd say, "Don't move that. You mustn't move that lot of papers, because I know where everything is." And all the chairs were covered in stuff.
The estate office, you see the roof was gone in the front of it, and that there was a huge amount of papers there, including that book of maps of the Sanford estate. The Sanford estate was a big estate.
The estate office is enormous, and it's full.
That now is the archive, and before you go, if you have time, you can take a look at it and you'll see one of the things we're trying to do here is to get an archivist, and I think you consider or have some sponsorship to get an archivist.
Yes, you were saying about that, John. It was splendid, yeah.
It's very important.
Yes, very.
To try to have a hand on all this, and for the many generations of your family, because you were a Mahon King Harman, and when we deal with that, you have also memories of Rockingham. And the title there, I think, was Lord Lawton.
That's right, yes.
From a lord to a sir, and that title definitely moved to King Tennyson, which is now a hotel. What do you call it, John? Farm, the Handley has it.
I know perfectly well. Kilronan. Kilronan.
Have you been in it?
Kilronan, I haven't.
Well, go. Well,
I haven't.
You haven't time this time. To visit, you'll see it. One of the kings married into the Tennyson family, and they were substantial landowners in the Origna area, and they also would have had the mining rights of the Origna mines, which was the only big coal mining. The coal wasn't that good, but it was a major coal mine in Ireland.
I went in there as a child. You went into the side of the hill on a little railway.
Yes.
I can remember doing that.
Yeah.
Extraordinary.
That now is open as a tourist attraction.
So I gather, yeah.
So if you're then kind of in the grounds of your ancestors, that king was and in Charleville, Big George was another, and at Nick's funeral, I was speaking to that wing of the family, actually, a man in England.
Right.
I don't know what happened to title Lord Lawton, because his grandfather felt that his son's child wasn't his son's child, and it went to the House of Lords. There was no DNA, and the House of Lords found in the favour that it was his child. Bit of history worth reading for you now. If you're not interested in history, but he was able to nearly disinherit his grandson, his heir and grandson, who I don't know how he managed the entail and that. So I don't know. There must be a Lord Lawton surely in England or somewhere.
There isn't, but I don't actually know what happened. The Earls of Kingston,
yes.
The present one has disappeared. Nobody knows where he is. He went to live in New Zealand. You remember Berkeley? Well, Berkeley's son, after Berkeley died, naturally inherited his title, and He went to live in New Zealand, and he was last heard of in Hong Kong, and he's completely disappeared. Nobody knows where he is. All the branches of the King family fought endlessly, usually about money. And so it was only in my mother's generation that there was any sort of rapprochement between them.
In my time, Rockingham was one of the very, very few estates left in Ireland that was kept in an excellent condition and continued on. They always had shoots, big shoots, you must remember them. The Major and Olive, the Major was a shooting man, he always went down there. Until the day it was burned, that was the way it was run.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I can remember it being quite intimidated by it as a child. It was very grand, and I found the whole thing quite frightening, because I was frightened of my great aunt and uncle then.
Well, I didn't know. I brought messages on a few occasions from Olive up to Leaslip, where he moved.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I never went there, actually. I saw them in London from time to time, but I never went to where they lived in Leaslip.
Well,
he bred racehorses.
Yeah.
And he'd always done that from a young age. I don't know what he did with the years and years back. They had their own hunt at Rockingham. They had harriers.
Oh yes.
And my grandfather Edward, the one who was killed in the First World War.
Yes.
The elder son, he at a very young age, and I mean it was under 20, I think. It was his hunt. He had his own hunt, and I've got the books listing the days out and whether they had a good day's hunting or not. And there are several bits that stand out at how lovely it was that Olive came over to hunt that day. That was before they were married.
Well, copies of those, now that is what we would like, copies of such sporting and shooting events, because that kind of will put the whole thing together. And you must have stayed or been on holidays in Rockingham.
We never really stayed. I think I stayed not more than a night or two there over the years. We used to go over there for lunch because it was quite close by, but we always stayed here, which was much nicer, because this was a nice home, you know. Whereas Rockingham didn't feel like that somehow.
Well, I've no idea, because as I say, other than just drop-in messages, I never met Sir Stafford King O'Harmon. Cecil I didn't know at all. He must have been in the First World War too.
Yes, he was.
Their son was killed in the Second World War.
He was, yes. Thomas.
Terrible
Yeah.
murder. If you spoke to the soldiers in the First World War, I knew a lot of them. That was real slaughter. I mean, children.
My grandfather was 23 when he was killed.
Yeah.
Just married.
And through, as far as I could see, and I mightn't be right in this, he actually owned Rockingham.
Yes, he did, yes.
He was the male heir from a female heir, and he actually was the owner of Rockingham. And if your mother had been a boy...
That's right, but it was entailed male.
Yeah, you would have...
Which was quite silly, since they knew there was going to be a war when they were married. You know, it was obviously coming, and they still entailed it male. And but Olive, being an only child, had this place, and came back here again after she was widowed.
I think they settled maybe 30 or 40,000 pounds on your mother.
She had something in her married settlement. Yeah. Not until then, I don't think.
Well, I do think that women's lib has gone over the top now. But I was listening on the car radio coming up, and the kind of if you are doing an interview now, you can't ask somebody are they married or single or have they a family, or there was a list of things which absolutely amazed me because they don't make any sense.
Well, you can't find the things out unless you talk about some of those things,
Yes,
can you?
No, but the problem I see there is that the way that women were treated, and this is way up to my teen years and a lot more, was absolutely scurrilous, and how they lay down under it. That now is a classical example of just because Olive's child was a girl, she was disinherited.
She was, yes. Yes, she was.
She was, that carry on like that is to me absolutely appalling, and worse than appalling, because to some degree that has gone on, but now, while the Irish Heritage Trust, the chairman and the chief executive are now replaced with two ladies. Now they were very good, but the two ladies, I think, are also very, very good. Which pleased me a lot, because I wouldn't have any bias. But when things go over the top completely, and when I was listening to this radio program and saying, how are you going to interview somebody, and are you going to ask them are they single or married or what? You're supposed to, this, if you so wish, and sign your MB or whatever you call it, you're supposed to read it and judge from there. But I mean, I think that's maybe a bit over the top. Anyway,
Lavinia, can I ask just a quick question? Do you remember the news coming about the fire in Rockingham, or do you remember any of that when Rockingham burnt?
No, surprisingly, I don't. It was 56 or 57, 57, I think you said, Jim, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was either, I think it was the Harvest Fair of Elphin, maybe the Spring Fair. The fairs, then you'd be on the fair at 4 o'clock in the morning, and the place was alive, just Rockingham.
Yes.
Fire.
I don't remember how quickly we got the news about it. We were certainly living in London that year, my family. And I was very busy going to dances.
Yeah.
I was 17. So I doubt that I took much interest in anything else, really.
Doing what young people should do.
Sorry?
Doing what young people should do.
Yeah, quite exactly. I know, because if one had taken in a bit more, those things stick in the mind, unlike things that happened yesterday. No. So
It's funny that we have 3 generations here. That we have your niece Melanie and Melvie's daughter Helena here as well.
Yes, it's excellent, because you two can perhaps remember some things. Yeah, the other side of your family, Helena, too, is got a lot of Irish in it, hasn't it? And the St John side.
I was just wondering, when you came here as a child, would your parents come with you, or were you just dropped off with your grandmother? Because your father was in the army.
My mother was always with us, but my father wasn't always. Sometimes he didn't come here at all, because his parents lived in near Cobe in County Cork, and so what time off he could get, he spent with us down there. We spent part of our holidays here and part of them with the other grandparents in Cork.
You were never left with?
On the sea. No, the only time I was here alone was when I was 16, and I was waiting for the family to come back from Singapore, where they'd been, and it was in the middle of the Suez crisis, and their boat got diverted all the way around the Cape in South Africa, so they were very late getting back to England. And I was here, and they arrived just in time for me to get rushed off to the brand new Roscommon Hospital to have my appendix out. My father said I'd had too many potato cakes for tea.
The reason I wondered that was because you became very close to some of the people who worked here.
Sorry?
You became very close to Annie, was it, who worked here? Somebody who lived in Strokestown.
The cook.
The cook?
Bessie.
Bessie.
Oh, Bessie, yes,
Bessie
yes.
Murphy.
Bessie was the most wonderful cook. Hence the potato cakes. But particularly when immediately after the war, the food here was absolutely amazing, because there'd been such strict rationing in England, and I couldn't believe the cream and the beef and all sorts of things I'd never met before.
Yes.
And I was telling you last night, Melanie, I think about the separator. Down in the not the big old kitchen, but the so-called new kitchen they made right down in the basement, and next door to that was the separating machine. But it was sort of silver bulbous thing, and you poured a pail of milk into the top of it, and then you turned a handle and it separated the cream from the milk, so the milk came out of a large spout, and the cream was sort of extruded from a very small spout, just slowly enough to put one's hand underneath and have a really good slurp. I can remember that. It was wonderful. It was wonderful.
It was 100 times in the age I was 10.
Yeah.
Full of with the machine. I can still milk cows. Yeah, when my father died, when we were all very small, and I can still milk cows, though you wouldn't get a cow you could milk because she'd kill you now. The cow would walk into the shed, you'd put a chain around her neck, give her a bit of food, sit down under her with a stool, milk her, bring in, throw it into the separator.
Yes, that's what we did.
To churn it. There was a double when you had enough cream.
That's right, and then the butter. And I loved making the butter pats with the two wooden things with lines on them. But we helped with the milking here too.
Yeah.
That was a huge help. I must say, it was the child's fingers. It was terribly difficult to get anything out, any milk out at all. I remember a very thin stream going in this huge bucket. But it was lovely, as you say, sitting on the stool, sort of more or less underneath the cow with your head against them, and they smell so lovely. I loved it, and I announced that I was going to be a farmer, and my mother said, "You mean you're going to marry a farmer, just as you were talking about?" And I said, "No, I'm going to be a farmer." I wasn't.
So did they have a working farm here then?
Yes. Well, sort of. I mean, they had cows, and everybody came down for their milk and things, and all the boys used to kick the cans through the cow pats on the way, which certainly wouldn't be allowed these days to drink the milk after that, but nobody seemed to suffer very much from it. And they grew a certain amount of wheat. I think it was wheat. I can never remember which it was now. But they had stooks anyway. It was all scythed and built into stooks.
You had to grow so much compulsory tillage when the earth you had during the war.
Oh, that's what it was it? Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Up to about 1947 in Ireland, I'd say later in England. And the cows, if the cow's tail wasn't clean, she'd give an odd swish and hit you across the face with a very dirty tail. So we used to split the hairs in the bottom of the tail and tie it around the cow's leg. You know, split it like hair in the leg, put it around the cow's leg and tie it so they couldn't hit you.
Yes, because they really could hit you in the face. Yes, they could.
All manure putting a mile, but it didn't. People seem to have built up a resistance against all this.
Well, they did. Yes.
When we were in the bog cutting turf, we'd be drinking water out of dirty rivers and nearly bog holes. It never took any effect on us.
No.
At all. It was a whole that has all died. That whole thing, because in the country, 50 to 90% of what you were eating was produced where you were. I mean, the pigs were killed and the bacon was cured, and the chickens were killed and they cooked and cooked. The turkeys were killed and what they didn't want to kill. All the vegetables were grown, each and every one. I grow vegetables still through habit, and I mean they're thrown out. They're actually thrown out.
Oh, that's a great shame. It's lovely, but straight from the garden.
Our grandchildren, they're not interested. If you give them a bucket of dug potatoes, they'll say, "Oh, we have to wash these."
My goodness, they taste nicer though if you eat them cook them within 10 minutes.
But that's apples. Like, have you much apples here, John?
No.
Well, we have only 2 trees, and the amount of plums and what I never saw before, a fox came in and eat plums on the ground. Now I've never seen that before, and if you told me that a fox would eat plums, I thought it was a badger, but we put up a camera, it was a young fox.
Was it?
Yes.
That's fascinating.
I didn't believe, but anyway, back, John, you got to get back to where you want to go.
Speaking of produce, do you remember much produce coming from the Waldhack?
Oh yes, yes. I mean, very, very much so. Particularly the grapes and the peaches, because it was always that time of the year, and they were what I call proper peaches, lovely white peaches, not like the yellow cling peaches, and wonderful grapes. Wonderful grapes, and it's remarkably difficult to spit out grape pips if you haven't got any front teeth, because I was at the age when they was getting the second teeth, and I remember having awful trouble with the pips.
So how many people were employed to look after all that garden?
I was just trying to remember. There were a lot of people in the early days, immediately after the war, mostly Tynans and Lytles. I don't know how many people there were in the garden then. And to bring the turf in and everything like that. There must have been about, probably about a dozen, I should think, outside. I'm just trying to remember all their faces so that one can I should think something like that.
A lot of work keeping them.
Yeah.
And they're still in the very early days when I first came here had a sewing maid. Went and sewed things up on the top floor. But there were fewer staff in the house then. Bessie was the mainstay of the whole thing, who cooked, and her sister Katie came and helped out in the summer holidays, and various of their family came from time to time. And later on, Thomas came as butler. There was somebody before Thomas. I think he was Costello. I think Thomas's predecessor was called Kinsella. Kinsella. Yeah. But there were certainly a lot of people worked outside.
The butler during my remembrance here was Massey.
Thomas. Yes.
And I think somebody said he was trained in Rockingham. I don't know whether he was or not.
No, I don't know whether he was or not. He might have been.
But Olive told me that when she would have lived in Rockingham for 6 or 7 years actually.
Yes, she did for a while, yes.
They were trying to trace, was her husband taken prisoner of war or what happened to him. and they never fully resolved it. Somebody told Olive in much later life that her brother or somebody was blown up with him.
That's right. She met somebody at a dinner party who actually had seen what happened to him. But they didn't know for ages, and they kept getting reports that he'd been seen somewhere too. It must have been terrible, actually. It was a very young widow with a tiny baby. She was only 20, yes. Yeah.
She
just 20. Her birthday is the day after Lily's. 7th of September, her birthday was.
Then would have lived in Rockingham, I'd say, for the 7 years afterwards. They were trying to trace them. And then she lived in England, I think, when herself and the Major got married, he was still in the army. So I think they lived somewhere in England. You see, the troubles then started here.
They did, because my mother certainly went to school in England most of the time.
So did they come here for holidays when your mother?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, but she never lived. So she didn't live here full time then. That is.
No, not entirely. No, I think they were here mostly for holidays. She spent a certain amount of time at Rockingham with her grandfather. My mother did. She was very fond of him. And she spent quite a lot of time there. But mostly they were here for most of the holidays, I think.
So meanwhile, your great-grandmother, Olive's parents, were still living here?
Her father, can't remember, he died before my parents were married. My mother was 19 when she was married, and I can't remember exactly when he died. Olive's father.
In the 20s.
Yeah, but it was quite early on. I mean, she didn't know him well at all. It was her other King Harman grandfather, well, Thomas Stafford, who she knew well.
He was the local doctor.
Oh yes, that's right.
And his, as far as I know, and this mightn't be correct, his father-in-law it went directly to Olive's husband, because in Tail again, there was a time when there was no male heir. It was sort of held in trust, and then as soon as there was a male heir, it passed to him again. So they passed over at least on two occasions they passed over the female heirs.
Yes.
So there was no ifs or buts about that. Yeah, but they from pictures I saw going way back, or drawings, Rockingham was it was a Nash house, I think, and it was a lovely two-storey over basement.
That's right,
and
yes.
They really destroyed it by building a block on top of it.
Yes.
So they took out that.
I've got a drawing of the original house myself, and it was much better proportioned. Obviously, they shouldn't ever have put an extra bit on top of it.
But wasn't the extra bit the Nash facade? Didn't they decide to get Nash into?
I know. Nash definitely designed the first house, which would have been built roughly around 1800, or because they lived in Boyle, in what is now the library and a museum, a very strong house there, which was then taken over by the military.
Yes, the King House, yeah. Yeah.
King House, that's where they actually lived. And I think Nash, roughly around that. Now, I'm totally unsure when they built the block on top of it. But
I'm not sure either, but I know it wasn't approved of by later generations. They said they'd wrecked it. So
Strokestown has a good presence in front, but that's possibly thanks to the architect, where it looks much bigger than it is.
yes, it does, doesn't it? Because it looks enormous. Yeah, yeah.
Because they even changed the format of the avenue, and there was a little lake there where the sunken area is, and that could be used as a drainage system, and the water could also be let out of it to get ice for the ice house. There is some tunnels that we found out there in front, and we were able to see where the river flowed. So they were able to fill that area with water, but they were also able to drain it. And they had other culverts going under an outdoor lavatory, and they had other culverts going under the yards, the inner yard, that you could throw everything into, which was taken away by the water. And then at a later stage, they put in, well, they were talking about a ram pump and then a turbine. There's a very, very old early turbine out there, as well as a newer one. When we got it, we updated a turbine there and we succeeded in heating the house. But it was a big commitment to keep it going. And when I retired, it was always giving bits of trouble anyway. So we were using it for generating electricity for the storage heaters. But in doing that, if places were too hot, we did harm, I suppose, because they started to shrink. So,
that's perfectly true. Central heating wrecks furniture, doesn't it?
About 17 or 18 degrees is more than adequate, but if you move up above that, you're creating problems. And I found this at home very, very strongly, because the house wouldn't have been heated for possibly 100 years, and when I put in the strong heat, well, things started to shrink basically, because you know, so that's, I mean, you want to be very, to know what you're doing in that area. Anyway, this girl is more stiff, so we
I suppose just we'll have one last question, because we could talk, it's brilliant, we could talk here for hours, and we could talk for the rest of the day. But when you came here, do you have any memories of, let's say, the town or the local area, go out on trips yourself?
Oh yes, I mean we used to take, as I said, either the ponies or our bicycles, and sometimes if I'd had one too many falls off one of the ponies, I decided I didn't really want to go riding, but we were made to, because they had to be exercised every day. So we used to go into McHugh's and buy a comic to read and some chocolate, which was also rationed in England at the time, and go off into a field somewhere. And I used to sit and read the comic sitting on the pony, while my sister was rather more energetic and liked riding. She sort of raced round around the field. And I can remember there were very, very few cars, like about 3 probably in the whole town, Stuart Hales used to hoot his horn every time he got to the crossroads where the roundabout is now. He used to hoot just in case something was coming. And we used to go up to Cantrinlock quite a lot. In particular, I used to go fishing with Father Geerty, whose brother owned the pub just on the road there, yeah. Taking tomato sandwiches and dripping sandwiches with us, and we used to go, we fished for perch and pike, neither of which is terribly nice to eat, really.
Oh, well, there's certain people in Germany now, pike is sought after, but I wouldn't. I never liked pike.
No, you get a mouthful of mud and bones, basically, yes, it's not...
And perch are full of bones.
Yeah.
To get the meat off, they're quite nice.
Yeah.
But there's so many bones.
There's too many bones.
But Father Geerty was a great fisherman. He was much, he spent his life. He ended up actually our local parish priest, or he died many years ago.
Yes, he must have done, because he...
long chats with him. When we bought this place, he came in and he said, there's a lot of people talking, but you people do what you like with it. So, you know, generally he'd be coming down from confessions of a Saturday night, and he might come in and if I had a bottle of whiskey, I'd take it out and the two of us would drink.
Yeah.
So we got a good night's sleep. But he was an interesting man. He had spent his time, I don't know where, he was in America and several places. But
I love the fishing expedition. It's fun.
He had a boat and a car and a trailer, and he loved the fishing thing. But
we used to go out to the loch and swim, and we, rather than take the car, we used to go on the jaunting car sometimes.
yes.
And I loved that. That was huge fun. Does anybody still have any of those lurking about somewhere?
Well, there's a track there which I think it got massive repairs.
Yes.
And
You sat sideways on it.
that's it.
Yeah.
It was a strange sort of conveyance. Yeah.
Yes,
Mm.
that was it. Very much so. I wonder people didn't fall off, but they didn't.
No, we didn't for some reason.
Would have been quite easy.
Yeah, very.
Well, the transport of the horse-drawn transport in areas around England, as well as coaches, they had four-wheel cars that would take about 5 or 6 each side, which must have been appallingly cold in winter. I mean, snow, and they went quite long distances.
Yeah, amazing, really. We went to Longford to go to the cinema once every summer. Otherwise, we went to Ross's Point to swim in the very cold Atlantic. And we used to go to Pontoon too. That was a nice place to go to.
Area to be fishing there, trout.
Yeah.
It is a lovely area, Mayo. Have you been in Pontoon, John? It's a spectacular. Mary Robinson bought a house down there. She sold it again, our First Lady President.
And we went to any point-to-points that were going too. That everybody enjoyed having a bet on the horses. 6pence a time, quite expensive. Pocket money wasn't a lot more than that.
Recently somebody sent me a picture of a horse in maybe the early 19th century who had won a very big race. I must try to look up that again. And this horse was in Strokestown. Yeah.
Oh yes, went to Strokestown show every year, of
The
course.
Strokestown show is running and first ran in the Deer Park in 1867. And that was very close on the tail of the Dublin Horse Show, which was run early on in the grounds of Leinster House. Of course, it moved out to. They were here, the Dublin.
And the show here moved on up the road too.
Yes.
But
Well, it's back here now.
oh, it's back here now.
Yes, and it was here
Oh, what fun!
2 weeks ago.
How nice.
Yeah. There were huge cattle classes and huge cookery classes, and then various types of course, the first day there was a lot of sheep and cattle, and the next day there was a lot of horses and dogs, and yeah, it's a 2-day show. But that show was one of the very, very early continuous shows that has now run forever. That is 151 years.
How nice! And it's lovely to know it's still going on.
Now maybe
We got rosettes to pin onto the ponies. Whether any of them were deserved, I rather doubt.
well now you maybe do you want to do a tour of the house?
Oh yes, yes. Helena certainly must.
Thank you very much for taking this time. It's great having you back here.
Well, it's really grand to be back. It's always lovely every time. Great to see all of you. Love sitting here in the big room.
We have to go up and visit Gammy.
We have to visit Gammy. Yes, we do. Definitely.
Who's there?
Gammy is one of Lavinia's toys that sits upstairs.
Oh yes, oh yes. The only connection that's left around is the son of John Codwell out there. The Codwells were
Remember the Caldwells? Yes. Well,
they were
yes.
partners, and they lived for a period up in the garden house, the tower.
So they did. Yes.
Broad
Yes.
Tower, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now the only one, and he is deaf, though not at my age, much younger, and He's married to a girl who came to me next month 50 years ago. And she still comes down to do odd bits of paperwork for me.
Oh, how lovely. That's a long time.
She has 4 children and they reared them very well. They're all professionals. Every one of them are professionals. So that's the only connection of people who worked here. But John, of course, his father and mother are dead. His mother was one of the Collinses, and the Collinses.
Yes, remember them well.
Trainers.
Yes, they were.
So you know,
Yeah.
they lived on one of the estate houses there in at the graveyard.
Yeah, I remember the Collins as well.
And they were professional horse trainers. Of course, early on here, they had their own hunt here, the Bowen Hunt, and the dog kennels were down. Way down at the side of the deer park.
They were all harriers, weren't they?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. They had a pack of hounds, and in the 19th century, there was a man paid, he was the keeper of the hounds, and he had quite a nice Victorian house down there, and they had a well and the whole scene down there, so there was a substantial hunt. And in the deer park you'll see where they had gaps in the walls to let the hunt through. So they had a situation where you took down these wire fences to let the hunt pass through. So
my mother, Lettice, rode side saddle.
Yeah. And Olive rode.
Oh, she did, of course, yes. But I mean, even my mother did that. You know, that late on.
I'd love to know how you'd stay up jumping fences.
Well, I asked my mother about that, and she said because of the way the saddles were designed, you couldn't fall off. She said it was much safer than riding astride, that you were so wedged that it was really impossible to fall off.
Except a saddle band.
I never put it to the test.
Well now, John, what are your...
Thank you.
Not at all.